We are taught that true love waits. We are told that if it is real, it withstands the lies, the distance, and the time. But Adeline knew the ugly truth. Love is fragile. It snaps the moment a prettier, louder voice tells it to. She stepped out of the carriage, the gravel crunching under her worn boots like grinding teeth. The rain was relentless, soaking through the shoulders of her grey coat. It was the only coat she owned. Above her, the estate loomed against the storm, dark and silent. Somewhere inside those walls was the man who had promised to love her forever. Somewhere inside was the sister who had stolen him. And somewhere, on the 3rd floor, was the childless nursery that mocked the tiny, unmarked grave Adeline visited every Sunday. She hadn't come back to fight for him. She hadn't come back for revenge. She had only come back because she had no choice. Adeline! The voice was sharp, impatient. Adeline froze. She knew that voice. She looked up the stone steps. Lydia stood there. The Duchess. She was wearing red velvet, bright as a fresh wound, contrasting with the dreary grey of the storm. She didn't look like a sister greeting a sibling. She looked like a queen inspecting a stray dog. "You are soaking wet," Lydia said, curling her lip. "Do try not to drip on the marble." It was imported. Adeline gripped her valise tighter. Her knuckles turned white. "Hello, Lydia." "It is your Grace now," Lydia corrected, turning on her heel. "Come along. I have letters that need writing, and my maid is too illiterate to do it." Adeline followed. The house smelled the same. Beeswax, old wood, and money. But it felt different. It felt cold. She walked past the drawing room. The doors were open. And then she saw him. Arthur, the Duke. He was standing by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked older, harder. The boyish softness she used to kiss away was gone, replaced by a jaw of steel and eyes of ice. He looked up. His gaze hit her like a physical blow. For a second, just a fraction of a second, Adeline saw a flash of something in his eyes. Pain. Regret. But then it was gone, shuttered behind a wall of contempt. He didn't move toward her. He didn't smile. He looked at her wet clothes, her muddy boots, and then his eyes dropped lower, to her stomach. The silence stretched, suffocating and thick. Adeline felt the phantom ache in her womb, the cramping pain she had felt 2 years ago in that roadside inn, alone and screaming. Arthur took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving her waist. "I see you are alone," he said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of warmth. Adeline swallowed the lump in her throat. "I am, Your Grace." "And the child?" he asked. The question was casual, cruel, as if he were asking about the weather. Did you leave it with its father, or did you tire of the burden? The air left Adeline's lungs. He thought she had abandoned it. He thought she was a monster. He didn't know. He didn't know that the father was him. He didn't know that the burden was buried under a willow tree 5 miles away. She could tell him. She could scream the truth right now and watch his world shatter. But she looked at Lydia, who was watching them with a predator's smile, waiting for the drama, waiting for the ammunition. Adeline wouldn't give her the satisfaction. She lowered her eyes to the floor, accepting the judgment she didn't deserve. "There is no child, Your Grace," she whispered. Arthur scoffed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Of course not. Things like that get in the way of survival, don't they?" He turned his back on her, staring into the fire. "Get her out of my sight, Lydia. She smells like rain and bad decisions." Adeline turned away, biting her lip so hard she tasted copper. "You are wrong, Arthur," she thought, the tears finally burning her eyes as she walked away. I didn't lose the baby because I wanted to survive. I lost the baby because I ran from you. The drawing room was a cage of velvet and gold. Adeline stood by the sideboard, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to hide the trembling. She was invisible, or at least she tried to be. She had become an expert at making herself small, at folding her presence inward until she was nothing more than a shadow against the wallpaper. Across the room, Lydia lounged on the chaotic sprawl of the chaise, her red silk skirts taking up enough space for 3 people. She was feeding a spaniel a piece of shortbread, cooing at the dog with a warmth she had never shown a human being. Arthur sat in the wingback chair opposite her. He wasn't relaxing. He was occupying the chair like a general occupying a hill. He was staring into the fire, his jaw set, his eyes dark and unreadable. He looked like a man who was allergic to the air in his own house. "Adeline?" Lydia's voice sliced through the silence. It wasn't a shout. It was a drawl, lazy and sharp. "The tea isn't going to pour itself. Or have you forgotten how to serve civilized people after living in that hovel?" Adeline didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that flinching only made the predator bite harder. "Of course not, Your Grace." She walked to the low table. The teapot was heavy, silver and ornate. It was the same pot she used to pour from when she and Arthur would sneak breakfast in the library 2 years ago, laughing over cold toast and stealing kisses between sips. Now, the sound of the liquid hitting the porcelain sounded like a gavel banging in a courtroom. She carried the cup to Lydia first. Lydia took it, her fingers brushing Adeline's rough, chapped hand. Lydia paused. She smiled, a slow, cruel curving of her lips. "Oh dear." Lydia laughed, loud and bright. "Look at your hands, Adeline. They look like raw meat. Did the love of your life not hire you servants? Or did you have to scrub your own floors in that little love nest of yours?" Arthur shifted in his chair. The leather creaked. Adeline pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. She tucked it into the fold of her grey skirt. "I manage just fine," she whispered. She turned to Arthur. This was the hardest part, walking toward him, entering his orbit. The heat radiating from the fireplace was nothing compared to the heat of his presence. It pricked at her skin. It made her breath catch in her throat. She held the saucer out. "Your Grace." He didn't look at the cup. He didn't look at her face. He looked at her wrist, where the grey wool of her sleeve was frayed, revealing the red, irritated skin beneath. "You are shaking," he noted. His voice was quiet, cold. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "It is the chill," Adeline lied. It wasn't the chill, it was him. It was the memory of his head resting in her lap. It was the terror of him seeing the truth in her eyes. "Clumsy?" Lydia sneered from the couch. Maybe it was the insult, or maybe it was Arthur's intense burning stare. But Adeline's hand slipped. The china rattled. A splash of hot Earl Grey sloshed over the rim, missing the saucer and landing on the pristine white rug. The room went deadly silent. Lydia gasped, dropping her book. She scrambled up, her face twisting into a mask of fury. "You incompetent fool! That rug is Persian. It cost more than your entire existence." Adeline dropped to her knees instantly. Instinct took over. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket. It was a scrap of plain cotton, worn thin. She began dabbing frantically at the stain. She scrubbed hard, her head bowed, her knees on the hard floor, degrading herself to save a piece of fabric. Arthur watched. He didn't move. He sat with his glass halfway to his mouth, his eyes narrowed. Lydia had told him 1,000 times that Adeline was proud, that she was vain, that she thought she was better than everyone else. "She only wants your title, Arthur. She expects to be worshipped. But the woman on the floor didn't look proud. She looked practiced. She scrubbed at the rug with a humility that didn't fit the villain Lydia had painted. There was no defiance in her shoulders, just a quiet, heartbreaking resignation. She looked like a woman who was used to apologizing for taking up space. "Leave it," Arthur said. Adeline froze. She didn't look up. She kept scrubbing, desperate to fix the mistake. "I can get it out, I promise. It won't stain if I said leave it." Arthur's voice was sharper this time, booming off the walls. But it wasn't directed at her. It was directed at the situation. He stood up, towering over her. He looked at Lydia, who was practically vibrating with glee at her sister's humiliation. Then he looked down at the top of Adeline's head. He saw the grey in her hair that hadn't been there 2 years ago. He saw the thinness of her neck. "Get up," he commanded. Adeline scrambled to her feet, clutching the stained cloth to her chest. She refused to meet his eyes. She stared at his boots. "Get out," he said, his voice low. "Go back to your quarters." "But I haven't finished," Lydia started. "She is not a maid, Lydia." Arthur cut her off. The ice in his voice cracked just for a second, revealing a flash of fire underneath. "And I have lost my taste for tea." Adeline fled. She didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen the way Arthur watched the door close behind her. A frown etched deep into his forehead, as if a crack had just appeared in the foundation of his world. Arthur didn't sleep that night. The house was quiet, buried under the weight of the storm, but his mind was loud. He paced the hallway of the master wing, a ghost in his own home. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Adeline on her knees. He told himself he hated her. He told himself she deserved it. She had broken his heart. She had lied. She had borne another man's child. But why did she look so shattered? He found himself standing outside the door to the small servants' room in the east wing. He told himself he was just checking the locks. He told himself he was patrolling the house. But he stopped. He heard a sound from inside. It was a whimper, a soft, terrified sound of distress. Arthur leaned closer to the wood. "No," Adeline's voice came through the door, muffled by sleep and terror. "Please, no." Arthur's hand hovered over the doorknob. She was having a nightmare. "It is too cold," she moaned. The sound was guttural, raw. "Don't take him. He is too small, please." Arthur froze. He is too small. She wasn't dreaming of a lover. She wasn't dreaming of silk dresses or jewellery. She was dreaming of a child. "Arthur!" she screamed. It was a single, desperate cry. It wasn't a cry of anger. It was a cry for help. She was calling for him in her sleep. Arthur's heart slammed against his ribs. He gripped the cold brass handle. He should walk away. He should go back to his wife. He should leave the traitor to her demons. But he couldn't. He turned the handle. The latch clicked, and the door creaked open into the dark. The door creaked open. Arthur stepped into the room. It was small, freezing, and smelled of damp wool. It was a cell, not a bedroom, and in the centre of it, on a narrow cot, Adeline was thrashing. She was tangled in the thin grey blanket. Her face was pale, slick with sweat. "No," she whimpered. The sound was broken, a jagged piece of glass. "He is too cold. Please, don't take him." Arthur stood frozen. His heart hammered against his ribs. She was dreaming of a child. He should leave. He should turn around and let the traitor suffer, but he couldn't, because then she screamed his name. "Arthur!" It was a plea. It was the sound of a woman begging the only person she trusted to save her. Arthur moved without thinking. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He reached down, grabbing her shoulders to shake her awake. "Adeline, wake up." Her eyes flew open. For a second she looked at him with pure, naked relief. She reached for him. "Arthur," she gasped. "You came." The words hit him like a physical blow. You came. As if she had been waiting for him. But then the fog of sleep cleared. Adeline blinked. She saw the Duke of Langston standing over her, his face hard, his eyes full of accusation. She gasped, scrambling backward until her back hit the cold stone wall. "Your Grace," she whispered. I was dreaming." Arthur didn't step back. He loomed over her. "Who were you dreaming of, Adeline?" She looked away. "Nothing. No one." "Don't lie to me. I heard you. You were begging for a child." Adeline squeezed her eyes shut. Tears leaked out. "Please, Arthur, leave me be." "Tell me his name," Arthur roared. The volume shattered the intimacy of the moment. He paced the small room like a caged animal. "Tell me the name of the man who gave you a child and then left you to rot in this room. I want to know who he is. I don't know what you are talking about. Yes, you do. You left me for him. You ran away to be with him, and now you are here, scrubbing my floors because he cast you aside." Something inside Adeline snapped. She threw the blanket off and stood up. She was in her nightdress, shivering, but her eyes were burning. "He didn't cast me aside," she screamed. "And I didn't come back because of him. I came back because of you." Arthur stopped pacing. "Me? Yes, you. Or rather, your wife?" Adeline laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. "You think I am here because I missed you? I am here because my aunt fell ill. She needs medicine that costs more than I can make in a year. Lydia offered to pay for it, but only if I came here. Only if I served her." Arthur frowned. You came back for money? To save your aunt?" Adeline stepped closer, her chin high. "You look at me with such pity, Arthur. You think Lydia is cruel? You think this room is a punishment?" She gestured around the damp, cold walls. "My aunt made me sleep in the barn when I couldn't pay my board. She let me starve for 3 days when I broke a plate. She watched me bleed and told me to be quiet because crying was for the rich." Arthur stared at her, horrified. "Compared to her," Adeline whispered, her voice trembling with rage, "Lydia is a saint. This room has a roof. I get 1 meal a day. That is a luxury, Arthur. That is how low I have fallen. So do not stand there in your velvet coat and judge me for surviving." Arthur looked at her. He saw the thinness of her wrists, the shadows under her eyes. He realized he had been hating a ghost, while the real woman was living in a nightmare. "But why did you leave?" he whispered. "If it was so hard." "Why did you run?" "Because I saw you," Adeline cried. "The night I left, I came to your chambers to say yes. And I saw you with Lydia. I saw you holding her." Arthur flinched. The colour drained from his face. "You saw us? I saw you betray me." "I didn't betray you," Arthur shouted, desperate now. "I was holding her because I was dying, Adeline." The room went silent. "Dying," Adeline whispered. Arthur ran a hand through his hair. "Do you know what she had just told me? 5 seconds before you opened that door. She told me you were pregnant." Adeline froze. "She told me you were carrying the stable-master's child," Arthur said, his voice breaking. "She told me you were leaving me. I fell apart, Adeline. I didn't kiss her. I collapsed. And she held me while I wept for you." Adeline stared at him. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. She told you I was pregnant, yes. And I believed her, because why else would you leave?" Adeline's voice broke. "I didn't leave because of a stable master, Arthur." "Then why?" Arthur stepped closer, grabbing her hands. "Tell me. Whose baby was it? Because Lydia said—" "Lydia lied," Adeline shouted. "She lied about the lover." She pulled her hands away, stepping back. "But she didn't lie about the baby." Arthur went still. Adeline took a deep breath. She looked him dead in the eye. "He died, Arthur. My baby died. 2 days after I ran from you." She saw Arthur's eyes widen, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He was too small. The cold was too much. She took a step closer, until she was close enough to see the gold flecks in his irises. "He had your eyes, Arthur." The colour drained from Arthur's face. He staggered back, grabbing the door frame to keep from falling. Eyes? Adeline nodded. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He was yours. He was always yours. And I buried him in a pine box while you were marrying her. She didn't wait for his reaction. She turned and walked out the door, walking past him, walking out into the storm, leaving the silence of the dead behind her. Arthur stood in the open doorway, the rain lashing against his face. The words echoed in his skull. He had your eyes. Adeline was gone, vanished into the black throat of the storm. Behind him, Lydia was frantic. She grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his velvet coat. "Let her go, Arthur! She is mad! She is lying to hurt you!" Arthur turned slowly. He looked at his wife. "She lied about the baby," he whispered. The realization was a cold weight in his gut. But she didn't lie about the rest, did she? Lydia blinked. "What?" "She shouldn't be poor," Arthur said, his voice rising. "Adeline had rights to the family land in Somerset. It was entailed to both of you." Lydia's face went pale. She released his arm. Arthur stepped toward her. "She told me she was starving, Lydia. She told me she had to sleep in a barn. She shouldn't have been starving if she had her share of the sale." Lydia stammered, backing away. "I sent her money. I sent her a stipend." "You sent her pennies," Arthur roared. The sound shook the glass in the windows. "I saw her coat. Lydia. It is threadbare. You sold her birthright after she left, didn't you? You took her inheritance and you bought this." He gestured violently at the silk dress she was wearing, at the gold around her neck. "You stole her home. You stole her child. And you stole her life." Lydia hit the wall. She looked small now, terrified. "I did it for us. You needed the money for the estate repairs. I gave it to you." Arthur looked at her with pure, unadulterated loathing. "You bought me with stolen money," he spat. "You disgust me." He turned his back on her. He didn't care about the scandal anymore. He didn't care about the title. He ran into the night. He didn't wait for a horse to be saddled. He grabbed the black stallion from the stall, mounting bareback. He kicked the beast into a gallop, tearing through the mud. The wind screamed. The rain was a wall of ice. Arthur rode blindly. He knew where she was going. She had said it. "I buried him in a pine box." There was only one place for the poor to bury their dead, the old churchyard at the edge of the woods. He rode like a madman. The guilt was eating him alive. He had sat in a warm library, drinking whiskey, judging Adeline for being low, while she was out there surviving the hell his wife had created. He saw the iron gates of the cemetery. The horse shied, terrified of the lightning, but Arthur slid off into the slush. "Adeline!" He vaulted the fence. He scanned the dark rows of headstones. And then he saw her. She wasn't standing. She was on the ground. She was huddled over a patch of disturbed earth near the tree line. She was on her hands and knees, clawing at the mud. "Adeline!" Arthur crashed to his knees beside her. She didn't look up. She was delirious. Her hands were raw, bleeding, covered in filth. She was digging. She was trying to put the mud back. "He is cold," she mumbled. Her voice was a broken slur. "The money. She took the money. I couldn't buy a stone. I couldn't buy him a stone." Arthur's heart shattered. She wasn't just mourning the baby. She was mourning that she couldn't afford to mark his grave because Lydia had stolen the land money. "Adeline, stop!" Arthur grabbed her freezing wrists. "I need to cover him," she screamed, fighting him. "It is too cold." Arthur hauled her against his chest. She was ice cold. She wasn't shivering. That was the danger sign. He didn't try to reason with her. He wrapped his coat around her. lifting her into his arms. She was terrifyingly light. He carried her back to the horse. She was limp now, her head lolling against his shoulder, muttering about the cold. Arthur mounted, pulling her tight against him. He turned the horse back toward the manor. He wasn't bringing her back to be a servant. He wasn't bringing her back to the guest room. He rode toward the main gates. Lydia thought she had won. Lydia thought she could steal the land and the man and the life. But Arthur was bringing Adeline home. And this time, he was going to burn Lydia's world to the ground to keep her warm. As the manor came into view, lights were blazing in every window. A carriage was parked in the driveway. A black carriage with the royal crest. Arthur's blood ran cold. It wasn't the doctor. It was the magistrate. Lydia hadn't just waited. She had made her move. She had called the law to take the madwoman away before Arthur could get back. Arthur kicked the horse faster. He had saved her from the storm. Now, he had to save her from the cage. The black carriage sat in the driveway like a vulture waiting for a carcass. The crest on the door was silver, gleaming under the flashes of lightning. The magistrate. Arthur didn't slow down. He didn't stop. He urged the exhausted stallion right up to the stone steps, sliding off into the mud with Adeline's limp body cradled against his chest. She was dead weight now. Her head lolled back, her skin terrifyingly pale against the dark wool of his soaked coat. He kicked the front doors open. The wood boomed against the stone walls, startling the group gathered in the foyer. They were all there. The servants, lined up against the wall, their faces pale. The magistrate, Lord Stirling, a tall man with a face like a hatchet, and Lydia. Lydia stood at the bottom of the grand staircase. She had changed her dress. She was wearing black now, the picture of a grieving, concerned sister. But her eyes were bright with triumph. "There she is!" Lydia cried, pointing a trembling finger at Adeline. "Lord Stirling, please. She is violent. She attacked me. You must take her before she hurts herself." Arthur walked into the light. He was dripping wet, covered in graveyard mud, his eyes wild. He looked like a demon rising from the earth. "Get out of my way," Arthur growled. Lord Stirling stepped forward, blocking the path to the stairs. He held up a hand, his expression stern. "Your Grace, please. The Duchess sent for me. She claims her sister has suffered a break with reality. Desecrating church grounds? Assault. This is a matter for the asylum." "She is sick," Arthur said, his voice vibrating with a dangerous calm. "She is not mad. She is freezing to death. Move." "I cannot do that," Lord Stirling said, signalling to 2 guards standing by the door. "The law is clear. If she is a danger to the public, she must be confined. The carriage is ready to take her to Bedlam." Lydia stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It is for the best, Arthur. They have doctors there. They can help her. We cannot have a madwoman running loose in the estate. Think of the scandal." Arthur looked at his wife. He looked at the guards moving toward him, reaching for Adeline. He tightened his grip on her. "If you touch her," Arthur said, "I will kill you." The guards froze. Lord Stirling bristled, his face turning red. "Your Grace, this is preposterous. You are protecting a servant over the safety of your own wife. The Duchess is terrified. She is not my wife." The words were spoken softly, but they silenced the room instantly. The servants gasped. Lydia's face went the colour of ash. Lord Stirling blinked. "I beg your pardon?" Arthur stepped closer to the magistrate, the water dripping from his coat creating a pool on the marble. "Lydia is not my wife." Lydia let out a high, nervous laugh. "Arthur, you are hysterical. The storm has upset you. Of course I am your wife. We were married in the cathedral." We were married, Arthur said, looking straight at Sterling. But a marriage requires a husband and a wife. It requires a union. He turned his gaze to Lydia. It was cold, dead. Tell him, Lydia. Lydia took a step back, clutching the banister. I don't know what you're talking about. Tell him, Arthur roared. The sound echoed off the high ceiling. Tell the magistrate the truth, Lydia. Have I ever shared your bed? Have I ever touched you? In 2 years of marriage, have I ever been a husband to you? The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The servants looked at the floor, terrified. They knew. The whole house knew the Duke slept in the guest wing. Lydia's mouth opened and closed. She looked trapped. That is private matter, she hissed. It is a legal matter, Arthur shouted. The law states that a marriage unconsummated is a marriage invalid. It is void. It is a nullity. He turned back to Sterling. She is not my wife, Lord Sterling. She is a fraud. She lied to entrap me. She stole her sister's inheritance to buy her dowry. And she has lived in my house as a stranger for 730 days. I will be petitioning the bishop for an annulment in the morning. Lord Sterling looked from Arthur to Lydia, his mouth hanging open. The scandal was immense. It was unheard of, but, Your Grace, if she is not your wife, then she has no authority here, Arthur finished. She cannot order you to arrest anyone. She cannot commit anyone. She is a guest in this house, and as of this moment, she is an unwelcome one. Arthur shifted Adeline's weight in his arms. He looked at the guards. Now, get out of my house. The guards looked at Sterling. Sterling looked at Lydia, who was trembling with rage and humiliation. She had played her final card, and Arthur had burned the table. We will discuss this in the morning, Sterling stammered, backing away toward the door. Come along, men. Wait, Lydia shrieked. You can't leave me with him. He is insane. Sterling didn't look back. The door slammed shut, leaving the black carriage to roll away into the rain. Arthur didn't look at Lydia. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. He turned and began to climb the stairs, carrying the only woman who had ever mattered. Lydia stood at the bottom, gripping the wood until her nails broke. You will regret this, she screamed at his back. I will ruin you, Arthur. I will tell the world you are sleeping with a whore. Arthur paused on the landing. He didn't turn around. Do what you want, Lydia. You are already a ghost to me. He kicked open the door to the master bedroom and carried Adeline inside, kicking it shut behind him, locking the world and the liar out. The heavy oak doors of the master chamber slammed shut, locking the world out. Arthur leaned back against the wood, his chest heaving. He was soaked to the bone, mud drying on his cheek, shivering now that the adrenaline of the confrontation with the magistrate was fading. He looked down at the woman in his arms. Adeline was limp. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breathing shallow and ragged. She looked small, too small, like a bird that had flown into a glass window. He carried her to the bed. It was massive, a landscape of white linen and down pillows that smelled of cedar and tobacco. His scent. It was the bed she should have shared with him 2 years ago. He laid her down gently, treating her as if she were made of porcelain. Get blankets, Arthur roared at the empty room, forgetting for a second that he had banished the servants. He stripped the wet coat from her body. Her skin was marble white, blue at the lips. She wasn't shivering anymore. That terrified him more than the cold. Shivering is life. Shivering is the body fighting. Stillness is surrender. He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hands between his own. They were ice. He rubbed them frantically, willing his own heat to transfer into her blood. Do not leave me, he whispered, his voice cracking. You do not get to leave me, Adeline. Not when I finally know the truth. A knock came at the door. Timid, terrified. "Enter!" Arthur barked. It was the old village doctor. He looked pale, likely having passed the angry magistrate on the driveway. He carried his leather bag like a shield. "Your Grace," the maid said she was... "Fix her," Arthur cut him off. "Just fix her." Arthur paced while the doctor worked. He walked the length of the room, back and forth, a caged lion. Every time he looked at the bed, he felt a fresh wave of nausea. I buried him in a pine box. The words echoed in his skull. He had a son he had never held, a son who had died because Arthur was too proud to chase the woman he loved. And now, Adeline was paying the price for his pride again. The doctor cleared his throat. Arthur stopped pacing. He spun around. "Well?" The doctor was packing his bag. He wouldn't look Arthur in the eye. "She is strong, Your Grace. The fever is high, but she is fighting. If we can get her temperature up, she should survive the night." Arthur let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Thank God. But..." The doctor hesitated. "But what?" Arthur stepped closer. The butt hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The doctor sighed. He looked at the scar on Adeline's stomach, the faint silver line that marked the birth of the child Arthur never knew. "There is damage, Your Grace. Internal damage. From the birth, and now the infection." "Speak plainly," Arthur commanded. The doctor looked up. His eyes were full of pity. Arthur hated him for it. "She will live, Your Grace, but she will never carry another child. Her womb is ruined. The infection has taken that from her." The room went silent. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Adeline. She had lost their son. And now, because he had failed to protect her, because he had let her run into the storm, she had lost the future too. The nursery upstairs would stay empty forever. He had destroyed her lineage. "Leave us," Arthur whispered. "But Your Grace, the fever. Get out." The doctor fled. Arthur sank onto the edge of the bed. The weight of the news was crushing him. He felt heavy, old. He reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "I am so sorry," he whispered to the silence. "I am so sorry, Adeline. I have cost you everything." Adeline stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. She let out a small, whimpering sound, like a wounded animal. "Adeline!" Arthur leaned closer, hope surging in his chest, painful and sharp. "I am here. You are safe." Her eyes opened. But they weren't clear. They were glassy, wide with fever and terror. She looked at him, but she didn't see Arthur, the man who saved her. She didn't see the regret in his face. She saw the monster from her nightmares. She saw the man who had rejected her. "No!" she screamed. It was a raw, scratchy sound that tore at her throat. She scrambled backward, pushing herself against the carved headboard, pulling her knees to her chest. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated horror. "Don't take him!" she cried, staring at Arthur, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for a cradle. "He is mine. You can't have him. Adeline, it is me. It is Arthur." "Liar!" She covered her ears, shaking her head violently. "You hurt him. You want to hurt him. Get away." She flinched when he reached for her, screaming as if his touch burned her skin. Arthur froze. His hand hovered in the air, inches from her face. This was the worst thing. He could handle her hate. He could handle her anger. He deserved her anger. But this? Seeing her look at him as if he were the devil, as if he was the danger. It broke whatever was left of his heart. He pulled his hand back slowly. "I won't touch you," he whispered, tears tracking down his face, hot and fast. "I promise. I won't touch you." Adeline curled into a ball, sobbing hysterically, rocking back and forth, murmuring to a baby that wasn't there. Arthur sat in the chair by the fire, watching her. He was the Duke of Langston. He owned the land as far as the eye could see. He had wealth, power, and a title. But sitting there, listening to the woman he loved weep for a child he killed and a future he destroyed, Arthur knew the truth. He was the poorest man on earth. The fever broke just before dawn. Arthur hadn't slept. He sat in the wingback chair by the fire, his eyes gritty with exhaustion, watching the rise and fall of her chest. She was pale. The firelight cast long shadows across her face, highlighting the hollows of her cheeks. She looked fragile, like a piece of china that had been glued back together but would shatter if he spoke too loudly. He stood up as her eyelashes fluttered. He moved to the bed, sinking to his knees on the rug. He didn't touch her. He didn't dare. He remembered the way she had screamed at him the night before. "Adeline," he whispered. Her eyes opened. They weren't wild anymore. The fever glass was gone, replaced by a dull, aching clarity. She looked at the ceiling. Then she looked at the heavy velvet curtains. Then, finally, she looked at him. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She just looked tired. A bone-deep exhaustion that terrified him more than the screaming had. "Arthur," she croaked. Her voice was wrecked from the weeping. "I am here," he said softly. "Here. Let me get you water." He poured a glass from the carafe on the nightstand, his hands shaking slightly. He held it to her lips, lifting her head gently. She drank greedily, the water spilling a little down her chin. He wiped it away with his thumb, a reflex of intimacy he couldn't stop. She pulled back, resting against the pillows. She looked around the room. The master suite. "Why am I here?" she asked. Arthur swallowed. "You were sick. The storm. It was too much." "Where is Lydia?" "Gone," Arthur said. The word was heavy. Final. "I sent her away. She is staying in the Dowager House until the annulment is finalized." Adeline blinked. "Annulment?" "She is not my wife, Adeline." He leaned forward, desperate for her to understand, desperate for her to see him not as the villain, but as the man who was fighting for her. "I never touched her. Not once. The marriage is a lie. I am ending it." He waited for a smile. He waited for relief. He waited for the spark of hope he used to see in her eyes 2 years ago. But Adeline didn't smile. She closed her eyes, turning her face into the pillow. A single tear leaked out, tracking over the bridge of her nose. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. Arthur frowned. "What?" "You shouldn't have sent her away. You need her. I need her." Arthur let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "She is a monster, Adeline. She stole you from me. She stole our son." "I know," Adeline said. Her voice was flat. "Dead. I know what she did. But she can give you something I can't." Arthur went still. The air in the room seemed to freeze. "What are you talking about?" Adeline opened her eyes. She looked at him with a sadness so profound it felt like the room was filling with water. "The doctor, Arthur. Do you think I was asleep? Do you think I didn't hear him?" Arthur's heart stopped. "He said I was strong," Adeline whispered. "He said I would live. But he also said I was ruined." "Adeline, no. He said my womb is scarred, Arthur. He said I will never carry another child. She pulled the sheet up higher, covering the scar on her stomach, hiding her shame. You are a duke. You are the last of the Langston line. You need an heir. It is your duty. It is your legacy. I don't care about the legacy, Arthur said, his voice rising. You will, she said softly. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in 5 years, in 10. When you look at me and see only a graveyard? When you realize the line ends with you because you chose a broken woman? She shook her head slowly. Lydia is cruel, but she is healthy. She can give you a son. Arthur stared at her. He felt sick. She was trying to sacrifice herself again. She was trying to give him back to the woman who had destroyed them, just to save his title. Is that what you think of me? Arthur whispered. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think I want a broodmare. You think I want a son more than I want you. It doesn't matter what you want, Adeline said, turning away. It matters what is right. Go back to her, Arthur. Let me go. I am barely a person anymore. I am just a shell. She started to sit up, wincing as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed. I will pack my things. I will go to the village. I can work. Arthur moved. He crossed the room in a blur. He didn't grab her arm. He didn't grab her hand. He grabbed the heavy, leather-bound book from the desk. The ducal succession records. The book that listed every Duke of Langston for 300 years. The book that was the holy scripture of his family name. Arthur! Adeline gasped. What are you doing? Arthur walked to the fireplace. The flames were roaring. He looked at her, holding the book over the fire. You think this matters? He asked. You think a name in a book matters more than you? He threw it. The heavy book landed in the centre of the flames. The paper curled, the leather blackened. The history of his family began to burn. Arthur turned back to her. His eyes were wild, fierce. Let the line end, he vowed. He walked to the bed and knelt at her feet, ignoring the smoke filling the room. He took her cold hands in his. I would rather be the last Duke of Langston and die holding your hand, than be the King of England without you. But Arthur, she sobbed, breaking down at last. I am empty. I have nothing to give you. You are not empty, he said fiercely, pressing her hands to his chest, right over his heart. You are full of me, and I am full of you. That is enough. Adeline, that has to be enough. He buried his face in her lap, and for the first time since he was a boy, the Duke of Langston wept. Adeline looked down at the man shaking apart at her knees. She looked at the fire consuming the legacy he was supposed to protect, and slowly, tentatively, she reached out and stroked his hair. It had been a year. 365 days since the storm, since the mud, since the night Arthur burned the history of his family in the fireplace to keep her warm. The estate was different now. The silence was gone. The windows were open. The smell of dust and old grief had been replaced by the scent of lavender and beeswax. But fear is a ghost. It doesn't leave just because you are happy. It hides in the corners, waiting for the sun to go down. Adeline stood over the porcelain basin, her knuckles white as she gripped the edges. She was shaking. It was the 3rd morning in a row. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the nausea, but it wouldn't leave. It sat heavy in her stomach, a roiling, sickening lurch that made her knees weak. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was pale. There were shadows under her eyes. She knew what this was. The doctor's voice echoed in her head, as clear as a bell. The infection has done its work. The damage is extensive. It was back. the sickness that had nearly killed her in the storm. It hadn't left. It had just been sleeping. And now, it had woken up to finish the job. She closed her eyes, a sob catching in her throat. Not now. Please, God. Not now. She and Arthur were finally safe. They were married. They were happy. For the first time in her life, she woke up every morning being loved. She couldn't do this to him. She couldn't tell him that after everything he sacrificed, he was going to lose her anyway. Adeline? The voice came from the bedroom door. Adeline froze. She grabbed a towel, frantically drying her face, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of glass. I am here, Arthur. Just washing up. She turned around. Arthur was standing in the doorway. He was wearing his riding clothes, looking tall and strong and painfully handsome. But he wasn't smiling. He was looking at her hands. They were trembling. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knew her too well for that. He reached out and touched her forehead. You are burning up. It is nothing, Adeline lied. She tried to pull away, but he held her face gently between his hands. You are pale, Adeline, and I heard you. Through the door. You were sick. It was the fish, she said quickly, last night. It must have been bad. Arthur stared at her. His eyes were wide, dark with a panic he tried to hide. He remembered the storm. He remembered carrying her limp body. He remembered the doctor saying she might not survive the night. I am sending for him, Arthur said. No. Adeline grabbed his wrist. Arthur, please. I don't want a doctor. I just need to rest. I am sending for him. Arthur's voice cracked. He pulled away from her, his hands shaking. I am not doing this again, Adeline. I am not watching you fade away. I am getting the doctor. Now. He ran from the room. Adeline sank onto the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest on the cold tiles. She waited. The hour it took for the doctor to arrive felt like a lifetime. She sat in the chair by the window, watching the rain start to fall. It felt like an omen. The sky was crying for her. Arthur paced. He didn't sit. He walked back and forth, a sentinel guarding a castle that was already crumbling. When the doctor arrived, the room went deadly quiet. It was the same old man, the one who had told them she was ruined. He asked questions. He checked her pulse. He pressed his hands gently against her stomach. Adeline held her breath. She waited for the words. It is the infection. It is fatal. I am sorry. Arthur stood by the fireplace, his back rigid. He looked like a man preparing for an execution. Well, Arthur demanded. His voice was raw. Is it the fever? Is it back? The doctor frowned. He stepped back from Adeline. He took off his spectacles and wiped them on his coat. He looked confused. No, Your Grace. It is not the fever. Her temperature is normal. Her pulse is strong. Then why is she sick? Arthur shouted. Why is she pale? Why can't she keep food down? The doctor looked at Adeline. Then he looked at Arthur. A slow, tentative smile spread across his wrinkled face. Because, Your Grace, that is what happens. Arthur blinked. What happens? When a woman is with child. The silence that slammed into the room was deafening. Adeline stopped breathing. Her hand flew to her mouth. Arthur froze. He looked at the doctor as if the man had spoken in a foreign language. What did you say? I said she is with child, the doctor said softly. About 2 months along, I would wager. But, Arthur stammered. He looked at Adeline, then back to the doctor. But you said she was ruined. You said she was barren. I said it was unlikely, the doctor corrected. I said there was scarring. I said it would be a miracle. He picked up his bag. It seems, Your Grace, that miracles happen. The doctor left. The door clicked shut. Arthur didn't move. He stared at Adeline. He stared at her stomach, hidden beneath the grey wool of her dress. "Adeline," he whispered. Adeline looked down. She placed a hand over her womb. She waited for the grief. She waited for the phantom pain of the baby she lost. But there was no pain. There was only a flutter. A tiny, quiet spark of life. She looked up at Arthur. Tears were streaming down her face. But they weren't hot. They were warm. "Arthur!" she choked out. He fell to his knees. He crawled to her chair. He buried his face in her lap, wrapping his arms around her waist, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in the universe. He sobbed. It wasn't a sad sound. It was the sound of a man setting down a burden he had carried for 2 years. A baby. He wept into her dress. Adeline. A baby. She ran her fingers through his hair. She looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. A shaft of pale golden sunlight hit the floor of the nursery upstairs. The room they had kept closed. The room they had been too afraid to enter. Arthur looked up. His eyes were red, but they were shining. "We have to paint it," he whispered. "The nursery. We have to paint it yellow." Adeline smiled. It was a real smile. It reached her eyes. "Yes," she said, "yellow, like the sun." He kissed her palm. He kissed her wrist. He kissed the scar on her stomach that had healed. They sat there for a long time. The Duke and his Duchess. The humble sister and the man who learned how to love her. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about Lydia. They didn't talk about the grave in the woods. They just sat in the quiet, listening to the steady, strong beat of 2 hearts, and the tiny, miraculous whisper of a third.
I walked back through the iron gates in a coat of threadbare grey. You never asked what storms I'd crossed or how I lost my way. You saw a stranger in the hall, not the woman you once held. You never saw the quiet room or all the nights I felt. I sat alone inside the fire, believing every lie. I let the silence teach my heart to forget the reasons why. I should have searched the freezing roads. I should have called your name. But pride can be a crueler storm than any wind or rain. I buried hope in muddy earth, a secret carved in stone. I laid our love in a little pine box and mourned it all alone. I read the letters far too late, the ones you never said. Each word a knife of all I lost, of all the time I spent. You walk back in like winter's ghost, still carrying the cold. And everything we never said came rushing to unfold. I trade crown, I'd trade the name. For just one truthful night, I'd trade the sorrow in my bones to stand again in your light. Your sister stole the moon from me, but she could not steal the sun. I ran from what I didn't know, and from what I'd become. I burned the book of history and every law I knew, for kingdoms turn to ash and dust. But I won't lose you twice, not you. We buried him in wind and rain, a secret in the stone. You mourned our heart inside that box and carried it alone. But love survives the darkest storms. When every light is gone, you were the woman I thought I'd lost, and I was your fading sun. The doctor said the room would stay as empty as the air, but miracles don't bow to grief or to a healer's despair. Oh, the sickness came at morning's rise, but this time it was life, a heartbeat fighting winter back, a promise cutting like a knife. Paint the nursery yellow love, let every shadow fall. The storm that nearly broke us both can't touch us now at all. We stand here not as ghosts of pain, not aching, hurt or cold. We are free. We are three, and we have a hand